foot stomping through the pines. Aliens sending secret signs. EVPs in the dead of night. Ghosts dancing in the pale moonlight. Paranormal 411, we bring it to ya. Truth behind the veil, gotta pursue ya. Talking about the strange, the freaky, the weird. Fearless, we dive wherever you see it. Portal opens in the woods so deep. Creatures crawl from a timeless sleep. Lights in the sky, they flicker and blaze. Signals from beyond these earthly days.
All right.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Paranormal 411.
It's Saturday.
It's Saturday.
Yeah.
We got a great show.
Yeah, it's got Artemaeus on tonight.
Yes.
Going to have a great conversation for sure. And can't wait for it.
Yeah. So, how was your day today?
It's pretty good. I did a bunch of nothing. Swam in the swim pool. I should have been mowing and doing some other things, but I just took a relaxing day. So
Yeah, I should have done a few things. I just sat and watched TV all day. So
it was just one of those lazy days, I guess.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Like David said, we got Artemaeus Treadwell. He is an American experiencer, and after meeting paranormal intermediary Tillie, his life took thousands of unforeseen, unforgettable turns. From witnessing Tillie's psychic abilities to bumping into a faerie, I'd like to hear that story. Meeting mimics, dark entities.
I've met a fairy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe even meeting an Egyptian god or two.
That's
Yeah.
conversation.
Seeing UFOs and strange planetary behavior and more. At home, extreme electrical events, strange scientific anomalies, and disappearing objects, time glitches, and the Mandela Effect are positively common events. Bizarrely, his foray in the deep paranormal has transformed his personality, beliefs, and understanding of psychology, reality, and life in measure and ways no short of miraculous. He believes that the unknown holds many gifts, if only we can learn to embrace them, and the unique messengers who carry them. So we're going to welcome Artemaeus to the stage here. How you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, fellas. I'm doing very well. How about y'all?
Oh, doing good.
I probably blotched that. I couldn't read for some reason.
That's okay. I need to work on amending it a little bit because there's some long sentences in there too. So
Yeah, it's a good one though. And so you're an American experiencer.
yeah, American experiencer for whatever that's worth. I guess kind of to give everybody a lightweight background. Prior to meeting Tillie, my life was rather unremarkable, pretty average, I would say. And my background generally was in human psychology, animal behavior, that sort of arc. And I thought I knew a whole lot about life. Attended university, and at that age, you're pretty well full of yourself, and you think you know it all. But after meeting Tillie, a lot of that changed, and of course, that's part of the reason why I'm here talking on your channel, because there's quite a bit to get to. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So how did that start with you?
Yeah, you mean with Tillie?
Yeah.
So we were both looking for a relationship, met in online dating. That's kind of what kids of our generation do. And we actually started with conversations about ancient aliens, ironically, and that's kind of what brought us together. And I don't know how much time exactly I'll have to talk about all the details, but Tillie, being the unique individual that she is, I have noticed in being with her that people generally have some pretty polarized responses to her right from the get-go when they meet her. She tends to draw out some extreme responses from folks, and it's usually like a mirror. It tends to indicate whatever they have going on, under the surface. We as humans will kind of mask and hide things bring that right out, whether you want it or not. And when I
Mhm.
first met her in person, so we had exchanged messages for some time, built up some good rapport, and thought, okay, this will probably be a good idea. So bothered to arrange a meeting in person. And I can look back on it now as funny and admit it with full humility that when I saw her come out of her apartment just so happy, just bouncing and joyful about this date, I just remember thinking, ugh, nobody can be that happy. And like throughout the course of our relationship, she's just always been and has always been described even by psychics or other people that have met her as just this pure ball of love energy, and that's, well, I guess what you might call the crystal beings, very, very pure.
Mm.
And, me having grown up the way that I did, which was a military family. So my father was in the Marines, pretty tough branch of the military. And so if that's any indication to you on precisely how I was to manage my emotions and my personality, it's pretty much how it went. And yeah, so when I met her, I just was kind of screwed up, within myself, thinking that I wasn't. And, we luckily she tolerated my behavior, perhaps in a very, again, compassionate and loving way, seeing, beyond that wall that I had put up. And it eventually got better. We ended up in a mall where we were talking, had good conversation to the point where the mall had actually shut down. The security guards didn't even know that we were there, which was also very strange. We went to go leave the mall and we were locked in.
That's
But
crazy.
yeah, weird stuff. And not something that you would think would actually happen, but it did, and afforded us more time to talk. And so, end of the night, I go to take her home. She gets in the car, and I keep thinking about this moment and the best way to describe it. And the only thing that I come up with is that she decided to delineate to me, describe to me that she knew my innermost soul essence. And then she began to, describe this. And these were things that I had never told anybody else about before. Just sort of these feelings of, knowing of my past lives and maybe knowing deeper about myself that, usually that sort of intimacy we don't share with other people, talking about, disclosure generally in the public. But she started telling me about myself, and there was this overwhelming feeling of actually being seen for the first time for who I felt that I was, very, very deep down at my core. And an experience that I think a lot of people, when they're trying to get into a relationship, they search for to be known, not only known and seen, but loved on that level too. That kind of love that some people describe when they have a near death experience, that white light and this all encompassing surrounding love. People that do mushrooms or, psilocybin, DMT, that kind of stuff. That was the essence of what I was getting from this message from her. And in order to validate some of that information, she told me that there was a being that was presenting himself to her as a Native American chieftain, full regalia, and that he said he was there to help facilitate this relationship, this budding relationship, and that, our souls had a contract. We went way back, and that we had a very distinct purpose while we were here together. And I mean, what do you do when you're faced with something like that? This just absolute vulnerability that just, I mean, every mask and defense and wall that you'd ever built was just instantaneously stripped away.
Now,
And
what was your feeling when she told you that, though, for the first time? When she said that you had these past lives and you had this soul contract, what was your first thoughts on that?
there were literally no thoughts, only the pure emotion, the connection of the feeling. Like when
Mhm.
people say that they get telepathic communication, that it's not really words, it's more of feelings and
Feeling.
pictures and emotions.
Yep.
All of that was coming through, like more than I had ever bothered to feel since being a child and shutting all of that stuff down just to kind of protect myself the way that I
Mhm.
grew up. And so she tells me about this being that's there and presenting himself in a certain way. And that was her way of validating what she was saying, that this entity calling himself chief and presenting the way that he did was there speaking with her. And immediately I knew who she was talking about, which this was that piece of information that, I mean, if I didn't believe her with what she was saying before, there was enough in that to completely seal the deal for me. My father collected Native American memorabilia, even though we have none of that in our ancestry, as far as I can tell, at least not in this lifetime. And who, exactly as she described, this portrait was actually hanging just outside my bedroom wall in our family home. So literally every day as I came into and out of my bedroom, living my life, this entity was there essentially watching over me. And she had never been to my house at that point. This was the first time we ever met in person. And yeah, it was quite the initial experience, I will say.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Cheryl says she would like to meet Tillie.
Yeah, she is something for sure. And usually she has me, and for maybe reasons we'll get to discuss further in the episode here. She typically has me come on to sort of lay the bridge and the groundwork to communicate with
Right.
people beforehand, and then she'll come on usually as a second episode because she has had a lot of trouble integrating with the average person as a neurodivergent individual. I know that word's thrown around a lot, but she absolutely qualifies as a neurodivergent type, which does present some challenges to her when just trying to communicate, socialize, integrate with the average person. So, like you could say, like some of the people in the autism community, high functioning autism, they tend to have some social differences. That she absolutely fits that category. So yeah, to Sharon, she'll happily come on and have a chat next time.
Awesome.
Yeah, she sounds like a wonderful person.
She does.
She is.
Yeah. That's now when you first knowing that you two first when you first started talking, you was doing the ancient aliens type thing and talking about all that kind of stuff. So obviously you was into that. But when she starts talking, when y'all are actually on this first date and she starts talking about a lot of this other metaphysical stuff, what was your thoughts on that? Or had you already started touching in that stuff in your lifetime at that point?
Yeah, great question. I had started to kind of dip my toes in the quote unquote alternative education scene because I had gotten, the standardized academic education at university and was curious about a little more. And like I said, I hadn't had too much that had happened to me. A couple of clairvoyant dreams, which is largely where a lot of my paranormal experiences happen, is in the twilight, sleep stage or in deep sleep. And so I had started to question, like, okay, I'm having these clairvoyant dreams. There's got to be some explanation for this that I've not yet touched into. So that's where learning about this esoteric and paranormal information started to kind of trickle in. And then here she comes with this bomb, and lucky for her, she at that point knew only to kind of reveal a little bit at a time, because generally with humans, you can't let all the crazy out all at once because that'll spook them and scare them away.
Right.
So, she, started to drip feed a little bit of this, knowing that I didn't know anywhere near as much as she did or had experienced. And of course, not wanting to sound crazy herself with her experiences. So there wasn't much more that happened in that first, I'd say, year and a half or so. It kind of, quieted down a little bit, probably gave me that time to digest what it was that had happened and also process a lot of the past life emotional load, the karmic stuff, a lot of that I did. In fact, during those first few times where we spent more time in person, it was like a floodgate. I started feeling all of the incredibly tragic ways that our interaction together on this planet had ended, consistent failure and like I said, a lot of trauma. And I was feeling all of it, all of the times that, she had passed before me or some tragedy had happened to separate us. And, days of this went by of me, processing this until finally she said, "Man, you're bumming me out. Like, we're here now. We're alive. We got a new mission. Like, let's go do this, And I'm like, no, I need I need to process this because it's all just coming out. But anyway, so all of that kind of had to run through the pipes before we moved to Florida. Then about a year and a half after we met, we moved to Florida. And for anybody that knows much about the paranormal, it must be the vibration of this land that is just conducive to weird stuff. But that's when more of the paranormal activity, the actual in-person experiences started to kick up for me. So
what kind of these activities did start happening when they started happening? Like what started? Was it more of a paranormal as in ghost activity, or was it other type of activity?
yeah, so that's also interesting that you bring that up because I had the last person that I was talking to ask me to kind of define what I mean by paranormal because I guess that means different to a lot of
It
people.
does. Well, see, that's why we call ourselves Paranormal
All of the
411, right?
experiences.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, you
no,
might be glitching out a little bit.
yeah,
Might be.
yeah,
For me, the paranormal experience, or I'm sorry, paranormal covers every experience that the
yes,
typical academic community can't explain for
yes.
me. So that's just a big bucket that catches everything.
Yep, I
So
absolutely believe.
cool. All right. So for me, the very first experience that I had was one that started to get me questioning about quantum realities and different, versions of reality that we're experiencing at any given moment. And it started with a very benign thing, but impactful nonetheless. So I had lost my phone briefly, and I knew that the last place that I had it, or so I thought, was somewhere in the bedroom. And so I'm, going through everything and I'm pulling the blankets off the bed, nightstand, all the usual places, and I can't find it. So now I'm thinking, all right, maybe my memory isn't all that great. So I'm moving throughout other parts of the house, still can't find it. Now I'm starting to look in places where there's no way it could be, like under the couch or in the fridge or, somewhere weird, and no, 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 can't find it. So I go back to the bedroom. Okay, it's got to be here. And it was only about maybe 10 minutes that had passed. And previously, as I said, I had pulled the blankets off the bed, touched all over the bed, under the pillows. It's not there. But I go to run my hand over the surface of the bed again, and I hit what feels like my phone, but it's underneath the fitted sheet of the bed. And I hadn't pulled the fitted sheet off, hadn't remade it. Tillie's not the kind of person to play any kind of prank with that sort of thing because she wants those experiences to be as believable without, any doubt as possible. She doesn't create doubt for that. So I, sure enough, pull back the fitted sheet and there is my phone. And I know that I had checked and I know that there's no way that I could have somehow put it underneath there. And so
Right.
I'm standing there, wheels turning, trying to figure this out. And, I think at that moment, Tillie kind of took the hint, hey, do you know anything about the quantum realities? And no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so thus began the education in, yeah, so quantum reality is all happening simultaneously. And, we occasionally will lose things into different realities and they will pop back in. And if that phone had been anywhere, just like, I don't know, maybe on the nightstand when I thought I left it in the bed, or it was out on the couch when I thought it was in the bedroom, I would have dismissed it. But under the fitted sheet, for me, there wasn't any explanation for it other than it literally disappeared into a quantum reality, came back, but in my reality, in a slightly different way that the only explanation could be just that quantum entanglement. So,
Yep. Yep. We had a show on the many worlds theory and kind of got into a lot of the, the quantum aspects of a lot of that stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty deep concept for sure.
yeah,
Overly
definitely.
overstoked Oscar says happens to me a lot. I think it's taken then put back. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, or could be. Yeah, yeah, definitely could be some poltergeist type of material, depending on, I suppose, what your personal vibration is attracting. So,
Right.
that the experiences that I have had, and generally when I speak about of um, learning more about non-human psychology and what that can learning about that, what that can do to help improve our own lives, in interpersonal relationships, and also informs the quality of paranormal experience that we have. So, having done a lot of studying that I did about the ego, human psychology, and then grafting that onto what I eventually learned about non-human psychology, I realized that we we have a lot more control over our own lives and our experiences with the paranormal if we do what Carl Jung would call the shadow work. That introspective work that when you go to therapy is sort of what that's meant for. And I realized after doing all of my own inner work how the two mesh so well that when you actually take responsibility and you do that sort of inner work and you become more self-aware, more conscious, again, the types of paranormal experiences that you have completely change. And so I have tons and tons of theories and another anecdotal information to share about that should you want to go that direction, or I can pick another couple of paranormal stories to tell you.
Uh,
Wherever you want to go
Wherever you
with
want to
it.
go. Yeah. I mean, we love stories. And so,
Cool.
yeah,
We love theories.
we do.
All right. All right, cool. So, yeah, all right. So let me try to nutshell this for you. Um, so when I met Tillie, obviously I had a lot of inner work to do. I was very unrefined, and through exposure to her, the type of psychology that she has, which is more akin to the non-human psychology, and maybe a lot of neurodivergent people are. Um, Learning the differences between the two, literally having that contrast ironically actually helped me to work through all of my inner baggage basically. And so that was a process that took some time, but she had told me that the work that she did with the Catholic Church, so she was doing exorcisms with the Catholic Church, and what she
Oh,
did, and she was able to communicate with the so-called demons that were causing all the ruckus and the mischief in the house.
Mhm.
The demons would say, look, we're only here because there's food. There's a particular vibration that these individuals are putting out. And whether they realize it or not, they're engaging in a contractual agreement that if they put this out, it's going to attract us.
Mhm.
And she didn't have a very good time trying to explain that to the people in the house because the people in the house just wanted the entities to go away. Come and throw some holy water, say a few prayers, and fix my problem basically because it has nothing to do with me. When in
Right.
reality, the demons were just there, as a byproduct essentially of their behavior. So every single time she would notice there'd be something like substance abuse or domestic violence, something along those lines that we might call low vibe, behavior
Yep.
that these entities were feeding off of. And she would try to explain this to the people like, hey, maybe don't beat your kids, maybe don't drink, try that first and see what happens, and those individuals would have, none of that basically. So she quit doing that work essentially until she could figure out how to get around the human ego, which is where I came in, Mr. Massive Ego himself. um, so it was, yeah, it was through working on me essentially that she began to fully grasp, the depth and the control that the human ego has over a person, and that what they have to do to, in some ways, not supersede it, but learn how to work with it. Because I'm not saying that an ego is a bad thing. It's not. It's what we need here to learn to survive, essentially, operate with other human beings or less aware, who are less aware, essentially. But there reaches a point where you are developed enough mentally to take personal responsibility and be able to change your own personal vibration and avoid the places where, people who don't take personal responsibility and abuse and all those things tend to just reside. So that was, in a nutshell, I guess, kind of what I learned. And almost all of my paranormal experiences have been neutral to very positive. And I'll share the one very negative experience with you because I think it helps demonstrate that difference between, average human psychology and non-human psychology. And it happened in, one of my twilight states where I'm not quite asleep but not fully awake. And that brainwave state would be called theta. So you have alpha, beta, theta, delta, delta being deep sleep, alpha being like a calm meditative state, and beta being the state that the brainwave state that people are in most of the time. That's either heavy fight or flight or, direct focus, competition, errand running, that sort of like sports athletes might be in a, a high beta. So high beta, low beta. I always get it mixed up. But anyway, so I'm in that theta brainwave state, which is like a radio frequency. It's a particular state that allows you to be able to experience and communicate with whatever entities are also choosing to be on that frequency. So I'm sitting in bed, I'm sitting up, and I'm looking straight ahead. And to my left, there's a mirror on the wall. And as I'm looking straight ahead, out of my periphery, I see something move in that mirror. And I know, because I'm looking straight ahead, that it's nothing in the room. And that's when the hair on the back of my neck stands up. That portion of your brain that's always scanning for a threat that goes, hey, something doesn't match up here. This is not an experience that you're used to having. Pay attention. And so I get, obviously I'm in fight or flight, and I turn to look over at the mirror, and coming through the mirror head first and extremely large is a very dark entity, some humanoid type thing. And this happened in a matter of seconds. I had zero control over the reaction that I had at this point, which was the pure essence of sheer terror. And I've never felt this before in my life. I've lived a pretty cozy life despite having a Marine for a father. There really wasn't anything so terrible as what this thing just turned on in me. And this thing just opened a gate valve that just channeled absolute horror and panic, visceral panic. And again, I had no control over it, but the feeling that I was getting, sort of from that telepathic communication, was that this thing was responsible for it and I had no control over it. And it was a really humbling experience. And up to that point, I'd had a little bit of training with lucid dreaming. So this happened several years into my relationship with Tillie when I started to try to refine some things for myself. And so I did my cue to end that dream segment. And I, come fully awake and I look over, and of course the mirror is not on the wall, and Tillie's sound asleep next to me. And because I had come to trust her at this point, I wake her up and I tell her, hey, I don't think this thing meant anything good, obviously, because of the feeling that I was getting that was intended for me to experience. And, she kind of does her, internal scan. Well, whatever it is not here anymore, and I'm not really sensing anything. So let me see what I can come up with after you, leave and go for work, because we don't need that conflict of interest there, basically. So, wise of her. So I leave and come back later from work, and she tells me that she invited this entity in the house, and she realized pretty quickly where her mistake had been. So she had recently been discussing with a colleague about this exact entity and what he or she was doing interacting with humanity, what goal they had. And this entity didn't appreciate that sort of discussion whatsoever. So being Tillie and, very humble and apologetic individual that she is, said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please let me know what I can do to make this right. And so they came up with 3 rules that were always to be followed. And as long as those 3 rules were followed, everything would be kosher, basically. The way that non-human psychology works is that 2 people, any parties that are involved in a situation, they all come together and they will all make agreements that are amenable to everybody involved. And those are binding agreements that are not to be changed for any reason unless everybody comes back to the table, has a discussion, and new agreements are set and made. It doesn't matter if, later on down the road, oh, I'm just in a bad mood, and so I'm just not going. The ends justify the means sort of argument. So I'm going to violate this tenet like humans usually do. It's not that way at all. It is always mutual, always clearly defined. And that's the end of that, really. It's pretty simple. So when she explained this to me, I thought, wow, if only all of humanity could remember their agreements and then actually keep them instead of consciously violating them like we do.
Right.
Yeah, that was different. I noticed immediately from, non-human versus human. And that was several years ago. Have not had a single interaction with that entity since. And, I asked her later, I was like, so, if the beef was with you, why would this entity come to me? And she basically, now it makes sense to me, said that, her particular vibration is too high to enact any kind of punishment like that. So this entity could have asked to approach her, and work out an agreement. But the way this entity likes to operate more is, no, I'm going to go after what's, closer to you and more on my vibration, the type of vibration that I like to engage in, and go that route, which clearly this vibration was that of abject horror, which was easy, easy to reach me on that level because as I learned, through my later studies and therapeutic pursuits, that I have a pretty low threshold for anxiety and panic. And so it's very, very easy to trip that within me. As much of a tough guy as I'd like to think that I am, I'm not. And, having that kind of humility is step number 1 to raising your vibration, ironically. And then even if you do have a low threshold for panic and anxiety, you will be far less likely to become a target of those individuals because of that humility. That kind of in some ways offsets that vibration, if that makes any sense. So
these entities, or this entity, do you think it was a dimensional being, or was it an ET, or what do you think it was?
I was gonna say that much I don't know, and I can't really say because I'll be totally honest with you. After that experience, that was one of those, okay, there's a bigger fish, and I'm not that bigger fish moments. And when Tillie says like, you stick to these 3 agreements, and you're gonna be fine, I said, you got it. Any way that I can avoid this, essential colonoscopy on level 10.
Right.
Take that. So I tend to avoid any and all stuff about it other than to use the story as an example to let people know, like, hey, there's bigger fish, learn some humility. And also, this difference in psychology is one that if we can maybe work on being mindful about in our day-to-day lives, it improves relationships, at least genuine, intimate relationships. Can't speak for other people who aren't quite on that vibe, and that's okay. But if you want to improve and you want to have, be on that vibration of the more genuine, intimate type of relationships, that's how you do it. So. But so after that encounter, like I said, and that being the only, what I would say is truly terrible encounter, but a necessary and an educational one nonetheless. I further on here in my development and education, I more recently, I'd say it was probably within the last 6 months or so, had the Egyptian god interaction, which was totally cool for me. So it was in a deep sleep state. So all the way in the same states that I have my clairvoyant dreams. And I'm walking along a sidewalk, and there's a strip mall essentially, or, cafes, shops, whatever on my one side. And I see this, what looks to me to be a pretty interesting, little trinket shop, kind of like that little shop where in the movie Gremlins, the main character finds Gizmo, where there's that, little doddering Asian guy, and these crazy, little shop of horrors basically all around him. And so I'm like, it looks interesting. I'll pop in. So I walk in and there's, people milling around. And from the back of the store comes this little Asian man. He sees me come in and he goes, "Hey, what you need is over there." And I mean, I didn't think anything of it. Typically, in the wakeful state in our day-to-day lives, you walk into a shop you've never been in before, a man you've never met in your life looks at you and says, "Hey, what you need is down there," might make you go, "That's not normal."
Right.
maybe I should be concerned about it.
Yeah.
Dream states, I notice where that portion of my brain, that fight or flight, the default mode network, as they call it, is offline, essentially. I'm much more objective. And I mean, calm is certainly an after effect, I think, that happens of it, but it's a completely different brain state. So in that state, we're not looking for threats like we are here day to day. We're open to experiences because there's generally nothing threatening to us in those states. So I see him, he points me over to the wall. I don't see what he's talking about. So he's like, no, around the wall. And sure enough, there's a brick wall facade, but it like blended seamlessly with the wall behind it. And so I, look, and sure enough, there's a staircase that goes down, which for anybody that knows esoteric knowledge, therapeutic analogies, that staircase down to the depths, of your inner world, essentially. So this staircase, I'm going down, and it opens up at the base to this big movie theater. And on the screen, they're playing something that's got Egyptian priests and priestesses that I assume milling about, and they are interacting with, speaking with these Egyptian gods and goddesses. So I sit down at the back of the movie theater and I'm watching for a minute, and the crocodile-headed god comes on the screen and is talking to one of the priests, and then turns to face the audience. There are other people in the theater, turns to face the audience, and then steps through the screen. And so, as a, big movie screen, it's huge. But as he's walking down the aisle towards me, he's kind of shrinking in size. So he's able to kind of manage his size until he gets back to me. And he's still taller than me, but not threateningly so. And I'm taking in his appearance, which was like high definition, more than we get in our day-to-day lives. Like if you were to look at one of those, OLED crystal, $5,000 TVs at Best Buy or whatever, like that just cranked up. Like the movie What Dreams May Come or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, just amazing color and texture. And I could see all the bumps and ridges, of the crocodile skin, but it wasn't, rough looking. It was handsome. Like the dude had this color, this richness and depth and the smoothness, but still the crocodile skin that just, it's so hard for me to explain because I've never seen anything like it. his robes just, crisp all the way to the floor, and he's wearing this big headdress, the pharaoh headdress, which is, as I later found out with some research, wasn't typical for this entity. But I wasn't familiar with him at all. I'm only lightly familiar with some of the basic Egyptian gods and goddesses. Didn't know this one. And so he starts to talk to me, and it was funny because it was like a badly dubbed movie where I could sort of see like the lips moving a bit and the tongue, flapping in his mouth, but not quite, like it would articulate if it were human. So I'm noticing all this, and he's just talking to me like, like I'm another person, no big deal. And I'm just listening to him like this isn't an Egyptian crocodile-headed god talking to me, And it was so mutual and personable that I was like, man, I wish that more relationships could be like this. Just, no agenda, no, nothing, no ego behind it, thinking, judging what they're doing or judging what I'm doing, none of that. It was just a refreshingly frank conversation. And he was creating a message to me that was actually for Tillie. It wasn't for me, saying, tell her that, she's doing a good job, that it's not her fault, that things haven't been working the way that she thought that they would, and she'll figure it out. There'll be a way to, do what it is that she wants to do. She's done great. It's okay, basically. And so I don't know what he's talking about. It didn't sound like anything that she had discussed with me. So when I wake up, I promptly tell her about this dream, and she goes, I haven't said anything to you about this yet, but she had started her own YouTube channel some time ago. And as I was telling you about giving information to people during exorcisms while she was working with the Catholic Church, the information that she was trying to give on her YouTube channel was getting a lot of flack from people, because I guess she was just being too direct and too frank about how to interact with paranormal entities if you'd like to have a better experience. If you don't, essentially, it's mostly your fault. And that was not landing very well, And so she's like, and she also had been approached by government officials and from other higher ups in the more mass media that we get about this sort of stuff. Think maybe producers of shows like Ancient Aliens. I'm not saying that it is that show, but stuff on that level. And they were saying to her, approaching her, saying, we want you to tell a particular narrative. We don't really want you sharing what it is that you're sharing, but we have information that we would like to put in the public consciousness, and we would like you to give it. But hell no. I'm not here for that, essentially. And there were other types of, threats like harassment. We'll say, certain types of harassment that I won't say on if this is going on YouTube. I don't want to get you guys strikes or anything like that. But yeah, so she was tired of it. She wasn't getting the type of progress. I don't want to say progress. She wasn't getting the type of engagement or positive effect that she wanted to have. So she was pulling away from it, but still feeling like she's got to do something, but not knowing what. And so I give her this message, and she's like, that makes total sense to me. Thank you. And at that point, things kind of, really started to come together, because from what I understand, the way that I interpreted it was that this God came to me to give her this message as a twofold thing. To, instead of coming to her directly, to give me this message to tell her, to say, hey, this guy finally has most of his crap worked through, that he's got this, years and years of education and how to talk to people with massive egos and, how to basically work with people to, bring that down to a healthier, manageable level, essentially. And, I now being on that vibration, that was my initiation, basically. And so what we started doing from that point was on our channel now, The Weird Walk Home on YouTube, I have done a series of videos called the Intermediary Diaries, where I essentially take all of these paranormal experiences that I've had with Tillie since meeting her, and give the lesson, the parable, whatever it is out of that I have learned, combining that with my understanding of human psychology to help people have not only better experiences within their own lives, but to have better paranormal experiences. Now that we're post disclosure, if people wish to have some say in the type of interactions that they have with the paranormal, and I think they probably do, that here's how you can do that. You really have control over that. And it starts with, knocking that ego back a little
Right.
bit, just a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, it was really cool to have that. And yeah, I don't really know where you want to go from there. I have more stories that I can share, but that's a lot to chew on. So
I just subscribed to the Weird Walk Home. I didn't know you had a YouTube out.
thank you.
But we will definitely.
We'll definitely keep watching for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely correct when you said your education helped you with your speaking, and you tell your story great, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Also about, I've been doing this for a few years now too, as far as trying to, and it's a hard thing for most people to even think about, much less talk about, but the ego,
Yeah. Yeah.
ego, it's a small word and it really means a lot.
Mhm.
And,
Well said.
and we, some great people that I've listened to, say it the best sometimes, but, but it's like, we don't take the time to know ourselves well, like you was talking about how you've taken the time to get to know yourself. And we want to have everybody, hey, I'm David, I'm part of Paranormal 411, or I'm a father, or I'm this, but not who I
Mhm.
really am, right? We associate ourselves with the things we do and the things
Mhm.
that we have and these other things. And that's the ego, and to separate yourself from that a little bit actually does help out when it comes to these things. And I'm on
That
that path.
whole identity, we get really
Mm.
entrenched in that sense of identity,
Yep.
and we'll defend that sense of identity as if our lives depended on it, like
Yep.
our actual lives. And that's where getting offended, by things that people say will switch us into that fight or flight brain and immediately make us basically impenetrable to logic and reason and
Mhm.
anything of that nature. We get real stuck in that area, and we're not reachable at that
Mhm.
point, which is also a place where you are out of control, completely out of control. Your lizard brain is now the thing that is in the driver's seat.
Yep.
So you when you entertain that vibration, you become very easily manipulated. And for certain
Yes.
entities out there, that's great food. You are a puppet based
Mm.
to all different areas of your life. When you're having a road rage incident, you do something stupid, or a boxer who, is more about just wanting to pound the other guy's face in because he's just angry at his dad, he's probably the guy that's going to get his butt beat because the other guy is, pulling more of a karate kid and is, getting into that
Really?
Zen mindset. He's not mad. He's calculating. He's actually able to think. And those are actual different brain states that you're in when those are happening. So, and that's again those radio frequencies that put you on certain levels of interaction with
Mhm.
those interdimensional entities. Interdimensional, it's just a different vibration, frequency. It's all around us, When you
Yep.
learn that, that's a whole different world to operate in.
It is. Especially when my whole life I've operated in a very low state,
Mhm.
a
Sure.
very, very low state. For a long time, I was not a very nice person at all.
Hmm.
But when you're trying to make that change, have you noticed though that things around you try to trip you back into that state as much as they can?
You
Because it
know,
seems like the more that I try to change into that
mhm.
to this new person that I wanna be, something tries to pull me back to this other state of who I used to be.
Let me reframe that for you. I think I can actually help you. So, rather than looking at it as instances that are trying to pull you back in, because that sort of mentality is and essentially it's a victimhood mentality. Things are happening to you, not for you.
Mhm.
So you can empower yourself by saying, these are instances that I'm being presented with as an opportunity to react differently, as an opportunity to respond differently. So I can see where the perspective would come from, where initially it seems like you're getting a lot of those opportunities that
Mhm.
are coming to you, when really what's happening is that you're developing awareness. So now you actually see those instances, which is kind of step one, is actually admitting and seeing, in
Yep.
what is it, Alcoholics Anonymous? Anytime you're
Right.
healing, admit you got a problem,
Right.
there's
Right.
one. Okay. You got to start there. Now you're seeing it. All right. So now that you see it, you you can feel what's happening within you, and you have a window where you can do something differently to change that response and change that brainwave state, and have a different outcome. And it may not feel like the thing that you want to do, because you've been trained to do a certain thing in certain circumstances over and over and over again. Those pathways in your brain, everything that's wired is wired a certain way because of that trained experience. So I'm not going to lie, it has been the hardest thing I have ever had to do in my life, is trying to retrain that. But over time, if you don't beat up on yourself, and you give some compassion for yourself, okay, I'm trying, I'm doing this differently, don't make excuses, but keep trying little by little. And it's taken me the better part of 10 years. So to give you a time frame here of what's realistic to expect,
Right.
that you know over time you won't actually experience those instances that are quite so aggravating, because you are changing your vibration. And through, if you believe in law of attraction, you are
Absolutely.
no longer pulling those things towards you at such a frequent frequent state.
Right.
So it's twofold. You do get less of those instances the better you get, because your vibration changes, and you also know how to handle the occasional, chunk of poop that gets flung your way, and it won't throw you off balance, because you're practicing a better vibration, and you have a different way to look at it now.
Mhm.
So, and that's kind of where I am at this point. In fact, to give you, this is not a paranormal story, but a quick side note, I had a guy who was just bloody enraged that I came out in front of him when the lanes were merging at a construction site. I thought there was more time, and there wasn't, and I had to cut over. And I could literally hear him screaming expletives at me for getting in front of him. And we ended up in the same place. Like, it wasn't like I, made him late by minutes and minutes or miles and miles. It wasn't anything at all. But for him, and I just looking at him, I could tell he was the type of guy that probably had a dad who was absolutely awful to him, or an absent dad, or something that was really rough in his childhood, that he had no control as a kid. And so the only control he has now as an adult is, on every single thing that he can grab. You cut me off in front of me, or you did this, or you did that, and I'm going to punish you, because that's how the ego will
Mm.
feel better,
Mhm.
if you let the ego drive your behavior.
Right.
But as I'm listening to this guy and I'm stuck, I'm thinking, dear God, like, we're sitting in traffic. He could get out if he wanted to and just, you know, destroy my car with whatever he wanted to. But he didn't. He's just sitting there, blowing steam, blowing fumes about it. And in my mind, I tries to do something. Obviously, I'm going to defend myself, but the first thing that came to mind was, man, you must have had it really rough as a kid, and not in like a descending or condescending, piteous sort of way. Just like, instead of also getting mad at this guy, like, who are you, man, for, getting mad at me for cutting you off? Like, I could be here too, like whatever, getting outrighteous and indignant. No, I'm just, in my mind going, yeah, you're in a rough spot, man, for something like that to make you fly off the handle and raise your blood pressure that much, It's really
Right.
not a big deal, dude. But to him, it was. Again, because of everything that probably happened to him as a kid. So all that to say that, you will have those experiences initially a lot as opportunities to train yourself. But in time, that's like the worst thing that I can think that's happened to me in a long time, and it was pretty big. It was a big incident, but yeah, nothing since that. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yep. Absolutely. It does.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
My pleasure.
Are you okay if we take a quick break and let you get a drink of water or something, about 4 minutes?
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
We'll do a quick break and come back. I know there's a couple of questions in the chat room.
Cool.
And
Well, more stories because
more stories.
Yeah.
Oh, I got them. Don't worry, I got them.
We got 2 hours.
Yep.
Or
Cool.
an hour left.
An hour left. Yep. So
Excellent. Cool.
plenty of time.
So we're going to take a quick break, everybody, and if I can find the break, here we go. Yeah,
Look at that.
and we'll be back. We're talking to Artemaeus Treadwell, and it's a great show. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's awesome. I can't wait for the second half.
Me too.
All right.
In the heart of Madisonville, Tennessee, lies a pizzeria like no other. Step through the door of Legends and Lore Pizzeria and be transported to a realm where paranormal and cryptid encounters along with mouth-watering pizza go hand in hand. Meet Eddie and his crew, who serve up slices of the supernatural along with the best pies in town. With the walls adorned with eerie artifacts, indulge in piping hot slices that melt in your mouth and tease your taste buds. And it's not just the locals who love the incredible pizza. Legends and Lore has been selected as the best pizza joint in all of Monroe County. As lovers of everything pizza and the paranormal, the owners have mastered the art of crafting unforgettable combinations that will leave you wanting more. To stay connected with this mystical eatery, follow Legends and Lore Pizzeria on Facebook, where tales of their latest creations and upcoming specials will be shared. Make sure to browse their custom menu, featuring legendary pizzas like the Chupacabra Ranch and the Exorcist. So, whether you have an appetite for the supernatural or simply seek the best pizza in town, Legends and Lore is the place to be. Come for the unforgettable flavors, stay for the captivating stories, and find yourself in a world where legends and pizza collide.
What if the world we know is merely a fraction of reality? What if there are forces, entities, and phenomena that exist just beyond our comprehension in the shadows of the unknown? Welcome to Paranormal 411, your gateway to the unexplained and the downright chilling.
Get ready to rock with the electrifying sound of Catalyst, a band that's sure to leave you wanting more. With their powerful lyrics and killer riffs, Catalyst is a great sound in the world of rock music. You can listen and find Catalyst on Bandcamp, or go to the link at paranormal411.org and click on their banner.
All right. We're
All
back.
right, we are back talking to Artemaeus Treadwell. If you just joined us, and he is a great guest and a great speaker, talking
Yeah.
about some of his experiences. I know we had a question, when we were talking about dreaming your
Mhm.
your dream.
Yeah.
Oscars asked if you always remembered your dreams.
Fantastic question. So I don't, and I have a little bit of a theory on that. I think worth sharing that it seems to me the dreams that I remember are dreams that are channeling something from what we would call the other side. So I mean they can be all different. It could be clairvoyant dreams or messages, downloads that we're getting, something that would be helpful, for our lives, and or actual, interactions with other entities. And the ones that we tend not to remember that fade when we shortly after waking up, I think are kind of just, the brain taking out its daily trash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's been on your brain that week.
Yeah. I've had
So
a few dreams like that, and I usually don't remember my dreams, but there was one in particular that I did, and it
mm,
was about alien entities. And I was having trouble, health problems, and the dream went on, and they'd acted like they were going to, touch me and heal me. And but I remember it so specifically. It was just like I was really there,
mhm,
and I'll never forget that dream. And I also had an OBE once while I was sleeping. It
yeah,
was crazy.
yeah, absolutely.
Do
So,
you
and again, since
do you have a special way to put yourself in the dream, like in a dream state, or do you just it comes naturally?
yeah, right now I think I'm not reliably do I have the ability to do that. I've started to listen to it usually takes listening to something like a binaural beat or a certain frequency through my headphones where I can really zone in that way and completely draw my attention away from the outer world, the stimulus. Because for me, from what I understand with my particular brain, it is like super plugged into this dimension. It is hyper aware of everything here on Earth. It is survival mode, kind of the that type of brain, and that makes it difficult to unplug my awareness from everything around me and get in what some people might call the zone or a meditative state. I've had to really work at it, but I can sort of get there with, putting the headphones on and completely dissociating from my environment and listening to that maybe repetitive thing, uh, drums or like I said, a certain frequency, whatever it is. But generally speaking, the easiest way for me is just when I hit those brainwave states and sleep. I don't have to do anything, and I'm there. So, yeah, that's the easier part.
Yeah, it's for me. I don't want to have another OBE because it scared the crap out of me.
I'd love to have one.
But I would like to dream, like it was very lucid, and
Hmm.
I felt, I did felt like it was real. I mean, and the OBE was real too, but it just scared me. Maybe if I had a couple of more, I wouldn't be so scared, and I probably could have went further than the top of my ceiling. But
Right.
um,
Yeah.
just
But it,
just brought that up, just some of my experience.
yeah, no, it's totally relevant. And I think interesting for you to note that it had, scared you that it happened. That is something that is actually just another part of the ego, part of the brain here, that anything that's out of the experience to be expected usually triggers that fight or flight response, which is why the more compassionate non-human entities generally don't interact because they know that they're going to interact with you in a way that's going to trip that fight or flight response. They don't, those entities don't want that for you, which is why you may only get to experience them when you're in states where that portion of your brain is offline, like doing psychedelic, for example, where it's just taken away from you. So, they don't have to worry about it. Why Mother Ayahuasca will talk to you, in that state if somebody's doing ayahuasca, or like I did an ayahuasca retreat. That's another story altogether. But yeah. So yeah, just offering some points on that. But
I
yeah.
always wanted to do ayahuasca, but I've done shrooms, and it was at the beginning of this whole trying to change, the way that my mind works, and and everything. And I noticed uh, after I did it, a big change in myself as far as being a little bit more compassionate. I
Mhm.
could say that before, I had very little compassion, very
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a selfish thing, but I had very little of it.
Mhm.
And I could say that I'm much more squishy now than I ever have been.
Mhm.
Some people
Yeah.
say it's my old age, but I know the truth. And what was weird to me though is that during the experience, my wife laughed at me because I had one thing that it seemed like it was repetitive to me, and it means a lot to me. It really does. It's crazy, but um, I noticed. So Mother Earth or Gaia started talking to me,
Mhm.
and she was showing me how we've disassociated ourselves from her and from the planet. We've disassociated ourselves with our everyday things that we do, the cars we drive in, everything. We've
Mhm.
completely disassociated from Earth. I mean, how many people walk on the grass barefooted anymore?
Right.
And do true grounding. But the one thing that I got off of it was over and over and over and over. I heard, "Just breathe,
Mhm.
just breathe," and that probably meant more to me than a lot of anything else has over the time that I've taken to process what happened.
Yeah. Well, and there's that one little piece of information is so loaded with
Yes.
so much knowledge too, because now we know about breathing exercises, meditative breathing,
Mhm.
therapeutic breathing in that way, what it can do to our physiological systems, our heart rate, and again, the different brainwave states that we're in. It can do so much.
Mhm.
And then that also reminds me that when I was in the middle of my ayahuasca, trip, I I had, I'll just spoiler alert, I was mostly terrified the entire time because there was a lot of stuff under there that I had to deal with, and I knew that. I didn't know how terrible it would be, but it one thing that had helped to ground me and I was so grateful for was the guy next to me who was asleep and sawing logs like, professional lumberjack. And I remember going, thank you, God, for his snoring. If I just focus on his snoring, I will get through this. But he's breathing, like,
Yes.
and that's for
Yes.
me, that anxiety and everything. Like, I even had some of the people who were babysitting, essentially, the shamans that were coming around, just being like, hey, breathe, you're gonna be okay. Like, I know this feels horrible right now, but just breathe. So it's
Mhm.
it's interesting that you would mention that something so simple, and that's oftentimes what it is, something
Yes.
so simple that we overlook because of these egos and being selfish as we are.
Yes.
That's what the ego is designed to do in some cases, to keep you alive. So
Right.
yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I've never done a psychedelic, but I probably never will. I'm a chicken.
That's okay. Let me tell you, ayahuasca. I will be the first person to say that that is not an experience that I would just casually recommend to anybody. You have to be fully aware of what potentially you're going to be in for, and you have to want it, because
Mm.
whatever comes once you're under, that's it, man. You are in it for the ride. You are strapped in. There's no getting off that roller coaster.
Yeah.
So like, you better be ready for it. So if you don't want to do it, no judgment there whatsoever. I believed that I needed my butt kicked, basically, because I still felt like I just wasn't getting over something that was holding me back. As it turns out, it was just me. But, you know, I went through that experience and it was gut wrenching and awful. But, you know,
Oh,
I did learn a lot of things from it, and I wouldn't repeat it, I don't think, at least not anytime soon.
Right.
But it is a teacher for sure. And something to keep in mind again about the psychedelics, all of them, DMT, psilocybin, LSD, that and there's actually a psychiatrist who you can find on YouTube. His name's Dr. Healthy Gamer GG, but he talks about how all of these psychedelics actually, what they're doing physiologically, neurologically, is they are turning that default mode network off in your brain. So the default mode network is often referred to as your autopilot. Through experiences in your life, they build, and you kind of become sort of narrowly focused. And that's just your ego, your brain, trying to keep you alive through saying, okay, this was a bad experience, don't repeat it. This was a good experience, do this. Even though there are infinite number of combinations of experiences and outcomes that you could have, the brain goes, you know, narrow, 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 more and more and more through your just things that come to you. And because we're not being conscious creators, we're just allowing our vibration to bring to us the mixed bag that it does. And the mood shifts day to day. That's why we get mixed results all the time. That, you know, that default mode network, once you take that away with psychedelics, it puts you back in what Dr. K calls edit mode, because he's a very tech savvy, you know, gamer kind of guy. And when you're back in edit mode, you're more objective and you're open to, you know, those kinds of downloads, new information, but also it opens you up to all of the stuff that your ego has been consciously repressing. So if you were generally a pretty happy person before then, like Tillie was, she and I both did this, you know, retreat that weekend, and she had an amazing time. She was like, that was awesome. I got to talk to Mother Ayahuasca, and I had the elephant goddess from the Hinduism come talk to me, and you know, I got to meet all these people and have all these experiences, and I was me. I'm literally between puking my guts out and convulsing in the corner and just feeling, you know, again, sheer panic at every turn. Total opposite experiences. But again, I believed that, you know, I needed that butt whooping. I got it. And that was just the difference between the high ego and then somebody like Tillie who's got the low ego. But Tillie had actually, she told me about this that 12 years ago, well before she even met me, she had talked about this ego being the reason why so many people said that the ego is the reason for, in short, mental illness. And when you take psychedelics, you get both. You get all your baggage that comes out at once, and then you also put your brain back in reprogramming mode. So you have a chance to do things differently. And, you know, Scott, I don't think that, I'm sorry, not Scott, David, I don't think that you being an older guy and being squishier now, the age has much of anything to do with it, because I've met plenty of old bastards, and that age does not matter. I think you are fortunate enough to have a vibrational awakening essentially during this period of time, and you're being given the opportunity to change. So
that's what I like about our friendship. He's hardcore. He takes the hardcore stuff. I'm a softy. I do have a lot of compassion for people, but
I love Jason because Jason's
he would have my back if I needed him, you know, when I couldn't do something.
Defend himself or take care of himself. Yeah, you better bet. Right there.
No, that's yin and yang. That's what makes a good relationship. Opposites attract in that way. You guys can learn from each other by, you know, comparing notes. So
it was funny when I was taking the mushrooms or the psilocybin, I noticed myself at first fighting it. Fighting what was coming on, not wanting, you know, here I had taken it. It was quite a bit, not quite a heroic dose, but it was pretty close.
Sure.
But I felt it coming on and I was fighting it. Right. But it was not until I finally let go of all that and accepted the experience that the the sickness and the pain and all the stuff that started hitting when I was fighting it
Yep.
just vanished. It completely vanished.
Mhm.
And then this peace and calm came over. And then it was an awareness of how interconnected we all are, that we're
Mhm.
all a piece of the same thing. And
Yep.
it started really getting me down a lot of Taoism and a lot of, going down some other places and really doing some studying on some stuff. And it was an enlightening experience for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So your ego had an opportunity to go offline for a bit, so that fighting it initially, that's the ego. That's the ego that doesn't want to let go of control, that
Mhm.
wants to determine things, as it judges fit, rather than just being, open and accepting of, whatever comes. It's not fearful. You're not being fearful anymore of consequence, essentially. You're accepting personal responsibility. And that's something that a lot of people run away from. Um, but it's that uh, lowering that ego then that allows you to, again, be able to communicate with other non-human entities. Because imagine, we know this from having relationship with other people, but imagine, a non-human entity who's just trying to talk to you, frankly, plainly, without anything in the way. And then there's a human who's, sitting there vacillating between freaking out, like, are you going to turn my insides out, or, are you going to try to have sex with me, or some, like, what are you going to do? Like,
Right.
while this entity is just going, man, I just, like, can we just talk? Like, can we do that? you know, like, so they don't bother, and that makes sense to me why they don't, as a result of that. So,
Right. Yeah, me see my whole life I've from the age of 3 I've been able to see ghosts. So it's been something that I've had my whole life. Never really been able to hear or listen to them. They've never talked to me. But when I was a kid, they scared the heck out of me because I'd wake up and there'd be people standing in my room. They didn't look like ghosts; they looked like people.
yeah.
Just no one else could see them but me.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'd jump up and run out of my room screaming and crying, and they would follow me around. And it took me till about the age of 5 to understand that what they were and that they weren't there to hurt me.
Yeah.
And it pretty much stopped from there. I mean, as far as
Yeah.
me being afraid of it, anyway.
Right.
You know,
Hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's just that bit of our brain that we get when we come to this planet, because this planet is part geared towards survival of the meat suit that we have. Otherwise, you're not going to make it here very long. And then, everybody serves a purpose here, no matter how long they are here. Is important to forwarding the story. It just comes with, a lot of other attachments, a lot of other parameters that kind of govern our behavior if we're not being cognizant of it. We're not practicing that level of self-awareness.
right?
But yeah, so I could tell some stories about mimics if
Yes,
you'd like.
absolutely.
So yeah, so
We do want to hear about the fairies too. So
oh
mimics
yeah,
and
yeah, okay.
fairies.
I'll if I forget, please do remind me. So the mimics, theories that I have about that, or rather, okay, so we're one point I wanted to make. I just remembered as I'm thinking about mimics. When you were saying that we're all part of the same source, right? All
Yes.
of us. When you say that, I know that you mean humans for sure, but a lot of people, and maybe you, maybe not, don't think about that and apply it to everything. That includes what we call demonic entities, or the intergalactic beings, or interdimensional Bigfoot, cryptids, all of them. I believe, maybe anybody else out there does too, that it's literally all from the same source. You can call it God if you want, but it's all the same source energy.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, then making judgment, we already do make judgment about other human beings, and that's, close to us, and we still do. But making that judgment about good and evil, ascribing intention without really knowing for sure what the intention of those other entities are, whether they be cryptids or, humanoid beings or aliens, whatever you want to call them, we are with that ego, judging and, setting up a particular vibration against essentially ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they don't look like us, if we're all one, follow it all the way through. We are definitely one. And that's not to say that we should put up with abuses. People will follow that all the way to, well, I mean, if we're all one and I should just kumbaya and love, somebody who comes to rob me, I just hand over my wallet. No, I'm not saying that. Just,
Right.
bear that in mind that, we're sitting here making judgments and, ascribing good or bad, evil or, whatever, and intention to things that we don't know and we don't understand, but they are portions of us. So to pull ourselves back and be a little bit more objective are just judgments that depend on your perspective, right? The shepherd thinks the wolf is evil because the wolf eats the sheep, but the wolf has a family to feed too. So the wolf doesn't think he's evil, but the wolf doesn't like the shepherd because he stands in the way of his food. Same thing,
Right.
and applying that to interdimensional beings or, what have you. Somebody's got to eat and somebody's going to be eaten. That's just how it goes. But anyway, so to talk about mimics. So me being the easily alarmed person that I am, apparently, when I have interacted with mimics, they have taken the form of Tillie. And I didn't know that they were doing this initially. I had 2 of these experiences. So the first one I think was kind of testing the waters a little bit. And again, I'm in a twilight sleep sort of state, so somewhere between sleep and awake. And I'm laying in bed, and I am noticing Tillie's next to me, and I go to look over at her sleepily, and I see that she kind of reaches over and puts her whole hand over my face, and she says, "Shh, go back to sleep." And what I knew about Tillie to that point is that she would never give me an order because that's something that, as part of her neurodivergent psychology, she will always phrase things as a request rather than say, go get me such and such thing. We might say that casually because we're in a hurry, but she would always say, would you please go get me? And frame it as a polite request. You can agree to it or not. So first of all, she would never give me an order, go back to sleep. Second of all, she would never tell me to go to sleep when she's awake unless she knows that I need it, because she's always up and bouncing around and she wants me to be up and bouncing around with her. So for her to tell me, shh, go to sleep, both of those counts, I was like, something's not right. So I go to lift myself, and if anybody has ever had the fortune of riding a thrill coaster where you get slammed back in your seat with enough G-force to peel the skin off your face, that is the weight that I felt when I tried to lift my head. It was like the gravitational force of Jupiter sitting on my face. And I was like, I can't, oh my God, I can't get up. And I'm fighting, I'm struggling, I'm, can't get up. And I'm, no, I'm not going to go to sleep like a toddler, tantruming, try at bedtime. Like, no, I won't do it. Fighting. And then I'm able to sit fully up. I'm like, holy crap, what was that? I'm looking over at Tillie. She's sound asleep, So I'm pondering, okay, it's not her. Maybe it was a dream. That's a little weird. But I didn't really think further beyond it. So I wake up Tillie. I tell her, she's like, I don't really sense anybody around here, or at least nobody that's, meaning any harm. I'm not getting that. Okay, well, they just tried to put me to sleep, pretending to be you, but okay, I trust you, dear. I guess
Not
it's
weird.
okay. Yeah, not weird at all. So, but by this point, I mean, this had been several years into the relationship. So I'm skipping ahead for a juicy story for you guys. Some other things had happened, but, okay, Tillie, I'll go back to sleep. So some years later, actually, so this other event happened a couple years ago. It was my 35th birthday, actually. So I'm again in bed in my twilight stage, and what I think is Tillie is initiating a little, fun game of wrestle in bed, and it had that sort of feel to it. I know you know what I mean,
Mm.
okay, this could be I could have a morning like this. This could be nice, you know? So we're wrestling around and, you know, she pins me down. And I'm like, okay, haha, this is fun. You know, we can play this game for a minute. And and then I notice like she's got me pinned really good. And normally she's super clumsy. She's very unaware bodily of herself. And to know enough to pin me in a way that was like professional sort of fighter kind of pin, I was like, okay, something's a little strange here, but maybe she's been studying. I don't know. I'm still enjoying myself until I go to get up and I can't get up. I'm pinned on my stomach and she's got me and I freeze for a second. Okay, now I don't know where this interaction's going, but it's Tillie, right? And then, ladies and gentlemen, to my sheer humiliation, I will admit that I feel, with the cover of a blanket, what feels like something rather stiff.
Uh-oh.
Like, no, 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 no. That okay, not Tillie. Also not something we've ever agreed on. I do not consent to this. No. And so I know I've got to be dreaming. This is not, you know, Tillie. And I, you know, close my eyes because that in my lucid dreaming, when I close my eyes in my dream, that's what causes me to wake up into this reality. So I do that. And again, Tillie's sound asleep next to me. All right. So I wake her up. I'm like, hun, all right, I don't know how to tell this. I don't know how to admit this to you, but I'm going to. I mean, you know, weird stuff. Weird butt stuff. Like what is this? What's going on? Clearly, I didn't want this, and I also do not wish for paranormal experiences of that nature. And she's like, okay, now I know what's going on. So the first interaction was just sort of like a test, like a whoever this entity was that was mimicking her was more from the type of vibrational family that she comes from, and they're all compassionate, you know, loving type. And so that first one was sort of a little test, which apparently I woke up in the middle of, wasn't supposed to. And they, you know, after I struggled, they let up, they let go. Again, if you say no, they go away. They don't violate that principle. So the second one, being around my 35th birthday, as she said, she's like, well, all right, so you were due for an exam. You know, you're getting older. And I was like, no, 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 not getting older like that. Like, we go to the doctor for those sorts of tests like years from now. She's like, no, 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 my people do it differently. They're checking to make sure because you're with me and we're doing this thing together that you're taking care of yourself as you're supposed to. And, you know, that is where they can gather the most information. I said, I mean, you're right, I guess, because I knew from my own studies that, you know, things like fecal transplants are becoming a thing because your gut microbiome and the absorbability of certain medications happens because of the vascularity and, you know, the nature of the tissue in that area. It's quite a space for that sort of thing. But our egos are like, no, 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 that's an exit only, or for the people that like it for pleasure, that's a totally different thing. But the rest of us, it's an exit only thing. And there's a lot of shame involved in that, right?
Uh-huh.
She's like, it just, you know, I know that I'm sorry that it was a violating experience for you. And, you know, but this is what was going on. And I said, okay, I guess I can kind of accept that. I still don't like it, but I can accept it, you know? So my mimic, and like I said, when I said no, I'm like, nope, I'm out. I don't want this anymore. It stopped. It was done. So unlike some experiences that people have said that they've had with grays where there was very painful probing and, you know, against their will sort of stuff, that's not not the case for me. So anyway, those were my mimic stories. And mimics can, from what I understand, mimics can take on any form that they wish, and they do so to garner a particular response from the human that they're interacting with. So if they want a fear response, they will appear as something that will trigger a fear response. If they want trust from you, in this case, the only person that I trust would be Tillie, and so these entities came to me appearing that way. I could use to do maybe a little more cognitive work and say, okay, you may appear to me in other ways. You do not have to appear to be my wife. Initiating a innuendous wrestling interaction in the morning. We can go different ways with this, but
I might
I will
have,
consent in other ways, right? So
I
anyway,
might have
but
been,
yeah, mimics can
I
be.
might have been mimicked. My doctor might have mimicked the,
Yeah, yep. I'm gonna say
I,
it's suspicious. They are.
I mean, I walk in there and he's got fingers as long as my leg and knuckles big around as my. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it could be like a
wait
Men
a
in Black
minute.
situation, man.
Whoa, hold on. I don't want to do that again.
Aliens. No, no, it's no fun. No fun at all. No.
No,
But anyway,
it
but
it's it's embarrassing, really. But I
yeah.
mean, this doctor had the fingers the size of Andre the Giant. I'm like, what the
Like that?
heck?
The size of the microphone.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, no,
Overly
Yeah.
overstocked Oscar says bend over and cough.
it wasn't no coughing.
No, just pure shame. Yeah, but again, that's the ego that feels shameful for whatever reason for it. And the doctor obviously decided consciously that he wanted that job, so he doesn't have a problem with it. That's where we
Yeah.
kind of have to swallow our own pride on that one. Excuse me, but anyway, so yes,
I believe my doctor was chosen for that job.
you needed an extra aggressive exam.
Oh,
All right. So yeah, so those are my mimic encounters, and then plenty of other people may have other encounters that could be ascribed to mimics. I believe, going back to that experience of the Native American chieftain when I met Tillie, was mimicking that individual in that portrait. I don't believe it was the spirit of or anybody connected with that person specifically. I just think that entity said, oh, here's something, an image that I can use that has significant sentimental meaning to me, and poses that individual, come to Tillie in that form. So I guess that's another mimic experience at a distance that I've had. But yeah, so there's that. And then fairies. So I know you said you want to only had one experience with fairies, and it was a little brownie, as I came to learn. So my policy on the paranormal stuff is that I don't do any research until after I've had the experience, because from my scientific brain, I don't want to bias the experience by learning about what other people have said or have
Yeah.
experienced. So I want it to be totally fresh, and when I come and say, here's what I experienced, at least I know for me, people don't have to believe me, but I know for me in my own head, like, if I can validate it with information after the fact, then that's how I prove to myself. Basically, that's my scientific approach to it. So this fairy was the nature of the work that I do, my day job, has me coming into people's homes and spending a little bit of time there to do my work. And so I came into this person's home, and I'm doing work, and in front of me is their living room, and I can see the couch, and there's so straight ahead is the front door. Coming through the front door is some light, and then there's the couch, and then there's me. And so I'm doing the work, and not from the corner of my eye, but in quite plain sight, I see, in complete reflection on the ground from the light coming through the door, a tiny humanoid. And I can say that it looked female to me, and really, who knows the sex of any of these entities, if it's anything like what we know. But when I say female, I mean feminine in appearance, so very slender, very slight. It had little dragonfly wings, and was probably, I don't know, maybe whatever that is, 10 inches tall or so, 10 inches tall. Yeah. And mostly shades of brown, like I later learned was a brownie. And she was standing right next to the bottom of the couch. And when I saw her and made direct contact with her, she kind of did this little startle and then ran underneath the couch. And I stopped for a second. Okay, yep, I saw that. I did see that. And then, leaned down. We see underneath it nothing there at all, not so much as a dog toy that could have somehow rolled under, blown under, I don't know, with that particular shape. I'm in my mind going, any explanation at all? Nope, I got nothing. Okay. I saw a fairy. I saw a tiny person. Sure. And nothing, no other movement was happening. So nothing in the house that could have explained this particular apparition or shadow or anything. So the impression that I got was just that this little fairy was watching what I was doing, and with great curiosity, and was obviously a little kind of startled that I actually saw it, which, from what I understand, could be, startled because many people that they're used to creeping on are not able to see the vibration that they are on, their particular physical form, or any kind of solid form whatsoever that's visible. And so maybe because this happened somewhat recently, it's only been within the last, I think, year and a half or so. And so I'm thinking that perhaps I'm on that vibration some of the time, that I'm able to see these interdimensional beings that are popping in and out of this particular dimension. Or maybe I was seeing another dimension. I'm not really sure. Can't be sure. So it was neat to kind of, for a minute, okay, notice that, that we're being watched. Okay, probably being watched all the time. Okay, a little creepier. But, if that is the case, helping you to be a little more mindful, but also to have an interaction that's not fear-based, and not trying to cause some harm, to me. It was just watching, just curious, which I believe a lot of interdimensional beings are doing a chunk of the time, is just watching, because humans are interesting creatures. We find ourselves interesting. Florida Man, for example, incredibly interesting to the rest of us. But yeah, they're curious about us just as we are of them, and maybe we can get more interactions if we put ourselves on that inviting vibration, making ourselves more palatable.
I know. I think my wife and I had a encounter with the fairy.
Mhm.
Actually, two fairies. It was a male and a female. Uh, I know some subscribe to the fact that they can make themselves look like us. Regular people.
Mhm.
We was a good friend of ours, Matt Sieber. He does East Tennessee Bigfoot. Was holding at a local place. You probably saw the commercial, Legends and Lore Pizzeria. He was actually having his group meeting and stuff there.
Cool.
And so we went to listen in on the group meeting and stuff, and everything. And it was while, it was during business hours and everything. And so we're sitting at a table, and the place is packed, like it is all the time now. But we're sitting at a pretty good sized table. Well, this older couple comes in, and they, are standing there, and they're like, "Hey, can we sit with you?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, there's plenty of chairs here."
Mhm.
And so we started having conversations with these people because they're interested in the conversations that are going on about Bigfoot and everything. And what's crazy about these people is that they're talking to the wife and I, and they're talking about that they live out in the woods, and all their furry friends that they take care of, the deer and all that stuff that they live with and that they take care of. And you're like, that's not normal, and most normal people were like, "Oh yeah, my house is out in the woods and we have a lot of deer and things like that." But no, our little friends that we help take care of, the rabbits and the deer, and start naming all these things. And so I'm sitting here thinking like, wow, this is strange, And as our conversations continue all the way up till this ends, and so on the way home, the wife and I'm driving, and I'm just sitting there just replaying over and over and over. And I just look over at my wife and I said, I think that they were fae. And she goes, "Oh my God, I'm glad you said it because I was thinking the same thing, but I thought I was crazy."
Right. Yeah. I have a question for you. Did they eat anything while they were there?
They ordered, but I didn't see them really eating.
Oh,
But they were
yeah.
talking a lot. I mean, and they were, like I said, they were interested in us talking about all
Yeah.
the Bigfoot talk that was going on. And so we had conversations about that and all of that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting.
So from what I understand, and there are books out there that you can read that talk more about this sort of thing, the nature of fairies here, what some of their common characteristics are, and one of those is that they don't partake in our food or drink. So it's interesting to me that you say that they ordered but didn't eat that you saw, and all of these other characteristics that you're talking about. I think I would agree with you that may well have been, um, yeah, may well have been Faye, and it kind of reminds me, well, talking on that same level, there are fairy lore about how if you're offered food from fairies, so in Ireland, they talk about this all the time, that if you're offered something from them, that will actually, that is a contractual binding agreement that will allow them to pull them from your dimension into their dimension. So,
Oh,
it goes both ways. So why they won't eat here and why taking food from them or drink from them will cause you to jump dimensions like that. And it reminds me that, them coming around like the pub sort of scene, like Interview with the Vampire. So movies are, in my opinion, lightweight disclosure for
yes.
the
Yes.
paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
And so Interview with the Vampire, anytime you see the vampires, they interacting with the human public, they will go and, go to parties, go to, the life of wherever there's human activity, crash parties essentially, and people watch and interact with them. They won't partake in anything, but they
Mhm.
will. Absolutely. That makes total sense to me. And even cooler to me is the little side note that we have pizza places that are like, the medieval taverns and pubs of, all the centuries that we've had, where people would come and gather and drink beer or drink coffee. Like every epic, every era has had its own consumption of choice, whether, like I said, coffee shops or pubs, brews, whatever. And now it's pizza, where people will come and gather and talk about these new ideas, which I think is totally cool. Love pizza. But
Yes.
anyway, yeah, that whole mixing pot right there, that is a excellent example of the interaction between, I think, one that you can have with non-human entities, fairies or fae, and people. Yeah, cool, totally cool.
Yeah, it was something about the conversation and the way that they spoke and stuff. I was like,
Mhm.
they're not human.
Yeah, yep,
They're not
and
human.
yep, I think you nailed that for sure. So, yeah, cool. Um, anything else that you can remember about them? Like the way that they looked, their eyes, or I mean, was it just the way they spoke and then not really eating anything? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, it was neat because they appeared to be older, and I mean older by they were probably upper 50s, maybe lower 60s is what their age looked like. Um, but when they spoke, it was not it was not like how a human would speak about things. It was, I don't know how to explain it, but they were talking like from a third person perspective almost on most of the stuff that they were talking about.
Yeah.
And and it's weird. It's like, David talking about how David likes to, go and drink water or something, I mean, it's not natural. We don't
It's
talk that way.
exactly. So it's so funny that you mentioned that too, because that gets into the language usage for non-human entities and the difference between humans and non-humans, because there are several. one of which is that, when we refer to ourselves, I, we'll say I this, I that, it's a self-referential high ego marker. So when you do that, you're very much, within your own ego, your own story. But when you start referring to yourself as it may be that other people perceive you, so that it's considerate of their perspective. So saying David this or David that, Scott this, Jason this, even with you're referring to yourself, that is giving proper consideration for anybody within that conversation so that they know exactly who they're referring to. You say I and nobody sees you and you're just listening, unless you learn that person's voice, you don't necessarily know who is talking. So we just do a lot of assumption when we speak and we say I because we're just thinking about it from our perspective, if this makes any sense. So things like that will be the difference between one of the differences between a non-human entity speaking, not familiar with the normal human vernacular or the way that we structure our thoughts and our words, but then also the way that we speak many times as humans, when I say we humans, is more in like cultural slang or turns of phrase that people around us might know, like killing two birds with one stone. If you were to say that to somebody who was unfamiliar with the phrase, they would go, we were just talking about you running errands. Why are you now talking about killing two birds with one stone? I don't understand where this came from. But it's a figure of speech that we as humans who are familiar with that will understand, and it's a shorthand for a type of communication. But non-human entities and also people on the neurodivergent spectrum don't use figures of speech. They don't really understand them. It's not literal language, which is more common for non-human entities and also neurodivergent people, which is part of that language barrier for communicating. We will say, we'll make hyperboles like, oh my God, I sweated a river last night, saying something like that, we as a human will go, oh yeah, man, you sweated a lot. Like that's a lot, but for a non-human entity or even a neurodivergent person, they would be like, again, why are we talking about rivers and sweat? Like, I don't understand what you mean by that. Did you sweat fast or was it slow or did it go over a waterfall? Why are we talking about that when it's sweat? Like, that sort of stuff, they're thinking about all that, but we as humans are like, no, man, it's not like, it's just a lot of sweat. I don't understand why you don't get that, So again, we have ways of speaking with one another that even if you go to another country, that doesn't translate, translating languages, even amongst humans, that can be problematic. And then you start to realize why that self-centered, egotistical way of communicating is less inviting to anybody else other than the person inside your head sometimes, So, that makes sense to me why it's hard for us to pinpoint what's weird about, mimics or fae that are communicating, but it's, as I have discovered it through my interactions with Tillie and the non-human entities, that it's those specific characteristics that make the difference between those two types of communicating, and why when you communicate with a fairy or mimic non-human entity, you can sense that something is different, but you don't know exactly what it is. So
and she wrote on there, Jason, we go back to that real quick because she wrote this next one up too, I think. So the wife wrote on there, she was like, so they were dressed in earth-colored clothes, brown and green cotton clothes.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then she says, not like hippies or anything, but they definitely talked third person. And like they never talked about home that they lived in, but that they loved and took care of all the creatures in the woods. So it was, I was like, it took me to the drive home before I finally looked at my wife and was like, I think they were fae.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And that's cool too, that it makes sense to me why they wouldn't reference home like we would, because that's important to the average human. It's part of the, so many basic needs that we have: food, water, shelter, that sort of thing. But for Fae, home is everywhere. It's wherever they want it to be. And they don't have needs, survival needs like the food that we have, where it's a dense reality here that we have to physically gather things. And if we don't have enough energy to do that, that means we perish. In other dimensions, the higher dimensions, they have ether, where it's just, okay, I want this and I will have this, and it's there. There is no struggle. Which also then, imagine a world here where nobody had to worry about being hungry. How that would change the dynamic and the interaction between people in situations where they have to worry about that. Fortunately for most of us here in this country anyway, a lot of us, I should say, don't have to worry about that. And even those of us that are less advantaged, there's food pantries, that you could go to. But even if, we didn't have to worry about that at all. The Fae don't have to worry about it because they can have it on demand. So how different things would be. They don't have to reference those resources like it's mine, because that's important for the human ego to reference it as mine, because that means I have it. That means I'm going to be okay. That's important,
Yes.
but not for the Fae. So
I will continue. Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, Artemaeus, we're about at the end of the show. If you want to give everybody your all your information and where they could, listen to some more of your things.
And we would love to have you back on,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
this conversation was not long enough.
No.
Well, I've been enjoying myself tremendously too, so I appreciate being here. I wanted to say, as a quick note, something that's kind of coming to mind is that you having that interaction with the Fae,
Mhm.
these are purposeful interactions. They choose consciously who they want to interact with, because they can. They're on that level of awareness. So I'm certain that they chose to interact with you as an opportunity for growth. Whatever you want to make of that, whatever you take from that, even just having the awareness of, I don't think those were human.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just enough to crack you open a little bit and send
Yes.
you further on this journey. Much like me meeting Tillie, it always starts with just a little wedge, a little crack from there, and what you do with it is
Yes.
your journey. But anyway, speaking of which, Tillie and I, mostly me at this point, can be found narrating videos on the channel that she created on YouTube, which is called The Weird Walk Home. And then her and I both, communicate on her Facebook page, which is Tillie Treadwell. And for anybody that is in the Central Florida area and or traveling to for the Full Disclosure Now conference, which is going to be happening next week, starting next Tuesday. It goes Tuesday through Friday, I think, Tuesday through Thursday, something like that. Anyway, we are going to be there. We're not speaking this year. We're just going to essentially be hanging on the coattails of the guy who organized it, as honored guests, as we've been labeled. Just there, meeting and greeting people, networking, that sort of thing, talking about the paranormal. Maybe next year we'll have speaking parts, but for now, yeah, anybody that's there, Tillie and I will both be there, and we'd love to connect with anybody and share stories and insights and continue on that weird walk home and personal growth. So
Awesome.
Yeah, we really want to thank you for coming on, and stay on the line here until we close out. I'd like to, talk to you a little bit more.
of course,
That's okay.
absolutely.
All right. So we're going to close her out, and thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, we
Thank you
really
for having
appreciate it. Yeah.
It was a pleasure. I loved it. Thank you.
All right. That was Artemaeus Treadwell.
That was that was an awesome show.
Yeah. Enlightening for me.
Yeah. I could have done another 2 hours.
Yeah.
I could have easily. So
This next week we have Greg Ogles coming on.
yes.
Right before the Bigfoot conference, and Greg Ogles is from Relic Films, and he's done a couple of documentaries on Bigfoot and the paranormal. So we're going to have him this next Saturday. Thursday, we're going to have Vic. No, that's the next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Yeah, this Thursday will be just me and David.
Coming up with a good show like always. Greg Ogles, if you don't know who he is, when we were at the Bigfoot Festival in Townsend, he was a person that we interviewed for about 45 minutes while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
So you could always go back and look at that and listen to him. He has some DVDs out, and I will tell you that last one he put out was amazing. Amazing. Relicfilms.com, and you could order a DVD. And Jason said that you might be able to even download it.
Yeah.
So either way, it was amazing documentary, and some of the stuff that they find on there is stuff that I've not heard or seen anywhere else. That's what I got to say. It was really amazing. So I want to appreciate everybody for coming out tonight and listening and everything, and chatting in the chat room with us, whether you was on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. And so everybody have a good night, have a good weekend, and we will see you on Thursday. Remember, you can find us at paranormal411.org, Paranormal 411 on Facebook, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Tune in live every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturdays from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also on Saturday nights, 10 p.m. to 11. If you're in the metro Atlanta area, you catch us on WDJY-FM, that's 99.1 FM. For listeners outside of Atlanta, visit WDJYFM.com or click the link. I think that's a little loud, Jason. I can't even hear myself. We're also on Subspace Radio and all podcast platforms. We have a book out, East Tennessee Hauntings and Lore Edition 2. That is East Tennessee Hauntings and Lore Edition 2, which is available on Amazon or at paranormal411.org. Join us. Thank you. Have a good night.
Have you ever wondered what lurks in the shadows? What secrets the night hides? What strange phenomena might be happening just beyond your perception? Join us as we journey into the world of the paranormal, exploring everything from ghosts and UFOs to cryptids and unexplained occurrences. From haunted houses to all things paranormal, join us in the search for the truth behind the veil. Welcome to Paranormal 411.